Hey guys, we're live here at Newegg Studios. We're talking about AMD Threadripper today. So this is the show at Newegg where we talk about all the latest cool tech, and we're super excited to have, of course, JJ from ASUS here to talk about new AMD Ryzen Threadripper, as well as the X399 motherboards from ASUS that he brought along. So if you have any questions, shout them out on Facebook and YouTube. And also be sure to, of course, check out Newegg.com. We have we have all the products in stock. Actually, looks like some of them are selling out quite quickly. But if you have any questions, be sure to ask out. And because we'll be covering, additionally, the rest of the Ryzen line, as well as Ryzen 3, and taking questions about what you need to know. Who are these builds right for? Who's this CPU really geared toward? What are the best benefits? So it's a pretty exciting stream. And so, yeah, welcome, JJ.
Thank you for having me. As always, it's awesome being here at Newegg Studios, and it's a really exciting time. I mean, I think this year has just been packed in with a huge amount of hardware, right? I mean, we're talking about a wide range of chipsets, a wide range of CPUs, and I think for AMD, a really big focus to kind of reintroduce themselves to the performance segmentation and to the PC DIY enthusiasts. And so, you know, in previous streams, we kicked off to really kind of set a precedence to be able to offer a great series of motherboards for the X370 series of chipsets. And then along with that, of course, for Ryzen, you now have 3 different Ryzen processors, right? Where you've got, 3 different series, Ryzen 3, Ryzen 5, and Ryzen 7, right? Post that time frame, of course, AMD has continued to be busy. You've had the release of EPYC, right? So on the server platform, which we're also supporting with our server series of products. But now we get into a really interesting space where we have HEDT, so the high-end desktop. Right, so this is an area that AMD's it's a really big focus for them to really be able to do something that I think is disruptive and offers a huge amount of performance for a wide range of users. And so it's a really exciting time to be able to take a look at the brand new 2 CPUs that I think we're going to predominantly be talking about. So Ryzen Threadripper with the 1950X, and then the 1920X, as well as the 3 different boards that we have that we're going to be talking about, which include the ROG Zenith Extreme, the X99-A from our Prime series, and then a new board which has not been shown before, which is going to be rounding out our initial launch for X399 with the Strix X399-E Gaming.
Strix, man. So for people that are watching, this is the Ryzen right here. This is the big dog, the 1950X. So this is the 16-core, 32-thread, retails for $999. So just under $1,000. We're actually going to do a little live unboxing of this thing so you can see what's inside of this, and also talk about the TR4 socket, you know, the new mounting, cooling, some of the things you need to know, because this is a slightly different platform. This CPU is like the size of a pickup truck. It's gigantic.
Yeah, so there's definitely quite a different kind of aspects to keep in mind. If you're looking to adopt into this platform, it's definitely focused at, I think, the users that are the most demanding on their system. You're really looking to have a robust experience in terms of concurrent types of usage, whether you're talking about heavy, you know, multiple tabs in your web browser, then swapping out to a game, then maybe jumping into a stream, right? Or you might be maybe rendering, and then at the same time your system's rendering, you can actually be doing other things. You can get back to actually doing, you know, web browsing. You can go actually jump into gameplay experience and still be able to maintain a great experience on both of the things that are concurrently running. But I think for a lot of people, they're wondering about kind of where this sits in the entire landscape now that AMD's kind of really released their entire portfolio. And so if we take a look at where kind of the entry is, right, with Ryzen 3, you're dropping all the way down to a native quad-core part that features overclocking capabilities that's supported on the B350 chipset, as well as on the X370 chipset. And for you guys that are interested in that kind of more mid-range or mid-range enthusiast space, we will actually even be talking about a really awesome B350 base build that we have that's on our Strix B350F. So we want to give you kind of some contrast and kind of perspective at the entire landscape of what AMD is bringing to the table, because performance exists really well across all these chipsets and across all these CPUs. Now, as we move over to the highest and current Ryzen 7 with CPUs like the 1800X, it's quite impressive, right? You're already talking about an 8-core part, 16 threads, right? But now that we jump into Ryzen, really where the differentiation is going to occur in a couple of key areas. One, you're going to be jumping into, of course, higher core counts. So you're going into 12 cores to 24 threads, or 16 cores to 32 threads, right? So very impressive performance. And just like what AMD is committed to across all their other Ryzen series of CPUs, they fully support overclocking. So that means that you can go in there, you can performance tune. And we'll talk a bit more about some of the really interesting things that AMD's done from a performance tuning perspective that we've also taken to heart in how we've implemented functionality for our motherboards, where there's options that have never been opened up to the enthusiasts before on how you can manage certain aspects of the CPU. So it's really, really cool that these type of kind of knobs and options are available. Now, in addition to this, one of the other really big things I think a lot of people have been interested in, and take for instance kind of like in the high-end system that we have here next to me, our Zenith Extreme build that we've got, a lot of people kind of have an interest at knowing, you know, the number of devices that you put into a system. if you don't have a clear understanding, generally when you go in to install all the different items, everything that's on the motherboard or is generally going to interface with the board, so let's say a graphics card, your M.2 SSDs, things along those lines, utilize PCI Express lanes. And this is really where there's a game changer, right? Where AMD is introducing a huge amount of PCI lanes for the CPU, right? So 64 in total, 4 for the chipset, and then 60 from the CPU. This allows for a lot of flexibility from a motherboard design perspective because it means that we can give you pretty much the best performance for any type of interface, so that we can really make sure that if you're looking to expand and run multiple M.2 based solutions, multiple GPU configurations, or if we really want to stack the board with a lot of secondary controllers, like USB 3.1, integrated Wi-Fi solutions, dual NICs, all kinds of different options, we've got more than enough lanes so that you don't generally have something that's called lane sharing, where sometimes some of these things shut off. So if, let's say, I use a certain M.2 slot, maybe my Wi-Fi might turn off or something like that. So it's variable, and this has historically kind of been more of the thing that occurs in the mid-range based chipsets. So it's really awesome to have this type of flexibility and know that it doesn't matter which Ryzen Threadripper CPU you buy, you're going to be able to have a great expansive experience because of this increase in the increase in the PCI lanes.
Yeah, that's something that's important. So a lot of people, for other products that are on the market, AMD is really proud that there's 64 lanes across all the CPUs. There's only 2 Threadrippers available right now, but it's 64 PCIe lanes for even the 8-core that's coming up. And I think one of the interesting parts of Threadripper that most people don't know is it's essentially, in many ways, 2 of the Ryzen 7 CPUs in one giant package. In fact, there's actually 4 CPUs in there, but it's essentially 2 1800Xs, both in terms of performance and sort of a way to think about it.
It's somewhat kind of like that. I mean, it's a little bit different. There's more of some actually architectural alignment with actually what AMD's done from their EPYC series of processors.
So explain EPYC. EPYC.
So EPYC is I'd say it's their server-based processor. So this is really an extremely disruptive platform that they designed to have extremely not only high number of cores, but it's a full SoC-based design. That in itself, Ryzen is also very different in that regard, where pretty much everything is built into Ryzen, right? And so there's a lot of impressive design features that have been put into play. But ultimately, I think what you're referring to is in terms of the total size of the processor, right? This is due to the way that their what's called CCX and their dies have been combined together to be able to produce what they have. But they've done this consciously because of aspects of how they can scale the different CPUs. So this is the modeling between something like the 1920 and then the 1950, as well as also when we talk about they're actually giving you the granularity and control to run things like legacy mode and also disable certain cores so that you can optimize for maybe better performance in applications that don't natively have great threading support.
Let's talk about that for a second. So on the high end, 16 cores, 32 threads. This is the one that people are excited about because of how much performance you're getting for $1,000. It's a pretty unique product. What is the base clock? It's what, 3.2 and then 4.0 boost?
For the 1950X, it's actually 3.4 gigahertz.
3.4.
All core boost is going to be 3.7 gigahertz. And then both these CPUs, because they're their highest end base CPUs that AMD's putting out, support what's called XFR. So the XFR is essentially like their built-in auto overclocking technology, which uses a lot of specialized logic that monitors different aspects of how the CPU is operating and helps to extend the frequency further. So there's, I believe the XFR is conditionally on 4 cores in terms of its maximum target. So that's 4 gigahertz, and I believe up to the maximum XFR, depending on the variables of the system, 4.2 gigahertz. Now, when we take a look at the overclocking capability, because of course these CPUs allow for overclocking, we have generally seen that there is a range between up to about 3.9 to as much as about 4.1 realistically for kind of high performance, kind of closed loop cooling solutions for all cores. And all threads, quote unquote. So that means that you could essentially have, a 32 thread 4 gigahertz system. That's a huge amount of performance. So it's very, very, very impressive. With the 1920X, it's just a slight difference in terms of those clocks, right? But fundamentally, the clocks, yes, 3.5 gigahertz. So it's a slight increase compared to the 1950X. So 3.5, 3.7, but then still 4.2 is still the same XFR. But overall, still same capabilities in terms of the memory controller support, the PCI Express lanes, and the overclocking capability. Now, memory, though, is another topic that I think is important. This was AMD's first platform as a whole when you talk about Ryzen, X370 to be able to introduce DDR4. ASUS as a whole has really kind of consistently led the industry in terms of advanced what are called topology designs for the DRAM implementations, and we've worked extremely closely with them. In fact, we were actually their launch partner across North America, sampling the actual latest generation Ryzen Threadrippers with our Zenith Extreme because of the great performance and compatibility that we offered. And with this, you have actually a range of DDR4 frequencies that are available. So depending on the density and essentially what's called the ranking of the memory, you're going to go down to as little as about 1866 and all the way up to officially 2667 in terms of DDR4. But through that close work that we've done with AMD and the design on the motherboards, we've been able to validate, 2800, 3000, 3200, and even with boards like our Prime-A and the Extreme, 3600. So when you talk about that this is quad channel based implementation of memory versus dual channel, which you see on X370 or B350, it's extremely impressive because the memory controller on this, what AMD has done here, because of the actual kind of tie-in that it has to EPYC, potentially has the support for up to 2 terabytes worth of memory. These DIMMs don't even exist on the market, so it's extreme.
They're crazy expensive as well. ECC memory.
And so that's actually another interesting aspect, is that the memory controller also does officially support ECC. For most of the enthusiasts that are probably going to be building systems because they're going to want to focus on bandwidth and frequency, they're probably going to be looking at XMP, of course, overclock kits, which are not ECC based. But that is the really interesting perspective that
which
you
is
have.
what we have here. It's traditional XMP, some very cool looking RAM from Team Group.
Yeah, and so we'll get into the nuts and bolts of kind of what that system has to offer, but I think that's a big question mark for a lot of people. Who are wondering was there going to essentially be a limitation in terms of having some impressive DDR4 memory performance on this platform, knowing that you were stepping up to quad channel and you were going to automatically be going to larger densities? Because with this type of platform, you traditionally see that people usually trend towards 32 gigabytes as probably their baseline kit. Definitely not uncommon to consider 64. And I would say that on the top end enthusiasts that are really looking for the highest level of course, system configurations where they might be running RAM cache, RAM disks, virtual machines, and a lot of kind of different types of scenarios in terms of maximizing memory. They might even be running, 128 gigabytes worth of memory. But that's the great thing about what this platform allows for. When you think about X399 and you think about Threadripper, you should really be thinking about expansive support. So it doesn't matter whether you're talking about storage, whether you're talking about PCI Express lanes for adding cards, or whether you're talking about the CPU and the cores and the threads and overclocking, or the DRAM, it's all expansive and it's all very performance driven.
It's all gigantic.
Yeah.
So one of the interesting things about this platform, just from a launch standpoint, is when Ryzen 7 launched, you were here, we did a live stream, some live demos with it. It wasn't the, let's put it this way, this SIP platform is based on Ryzen, so it's much more mature. So you're able to get those XMP profiles from the beginning. There's a lot more support just based on what AMD has been doing, for the last few months with Ryzen. Since this is a Ryzen-based CPU and platform, it's very, very mature compared to where Ryzen was when it originally launched.
Yeah, no, that's a really great point. I mean, we worked really closely, even day one on X370, to actually have our DOC pre-profiling technology that allowed for enabling XMP. But through definitely close work with AMD, AMD has released actually 2 formal what are called AGISAs. This is kind of like the firmware that helps to manage the way a lot of things work between the CPU and the motherboard. And the implementation of these AGISAs and other updates have really helped to patch in and offer a great level of interoperability, compatibility, and performance for DDR4. So definitely you can feel very, very confident that as a user now, as you're stepping into the platform, you're going to see that there's quite a number of different choices that are formally available, not only as either AMD certified memory right off the bat, or of course XMP-based memory, which is an Intel profile, but that we've gone ahead and implemented support. So the great thing is that when we get into talking about the motherboards, of course, all of them are going to feature the same type of quad-channel memory support. All are going to feature 8 DIMM slots, and they're all going to feature that DOCP profiling technology. So that means that as simply as going into the UEFI, the user can click one button and enable the XMP profile.
Yeah, so in the simplest of terms, platform is roughly as mature as Ryzen. Sure, there's new motherboards, which means new BIOS or UEFI, but it's not going to have any of the sort of issues that people that were trying to do some fancy
things.
Yeah, no,
it definitely things have gotten better. So I think moving a little bit more. AMD has also done a lot of work in terms of the instruction set. So it's something they call instructional set parallelism. And this is really important because when you step into a processor that has so many threads, and you have such a high core count, you really want to look to maximize efficiency in the way that the architecture works, because of course you're going to have differences in the way applications run, whether you're talking about lightly threaded applications to, of course, now many of the newer applications and games that are now definitely benefiting from this. So they've done a lot of work in that regard. Now, of course, when you talk about workloads and you talk about extensively loading your system, you're going to talk about thermals. And so this is an interesting thing to kind of keep in mind that people might have some questions about. So when you're talking about this platform in general, you do want to keep in mind it's entirely new socket, right? So with a new socket generally means that there's going to be interoperability or compatibility concerns that you might have to keep in mind as a builder, as somebody that wants to purchase something. So for our system right here, we actually have Thermaltake's new Flow 360 closed loop water cooling solution. As a whole, actually AMD's worked very closely with a lot of the CLC manufacturers, so closed loop cooling solutions, as well as high performance tower heat sinks, where there'll be about 25 options roughly available at launch that will be compatible. And then actually inside the box, when we crack that open, you will actually find that for closed loop cooling solutions, which really I think are going to be in alignment for somebody that's going to be purchasing this type of CPU, because you're going to want to be able to make sure that it's cool. You're going to want to give yourself overclocking margin, right? And you also want to have a quiet operating system. You're going to get the actual bracket that will allow you to have compatibility with different types of cooling solutions, whether it's something like this Flow 360, or whether it's an NZXT Kraken, or whether it's any number of the Asetek cooling solutions that are out there.
The bracket's already included in here, and a lot of people don't know about that. Asetek is the patent holder for a lot of the cooling that's done out there right now, but everyone has their own implementation. So yeah, brackets included, so you don't have to hit up the manufacturer, please send me out my AM4 bracket, like Ryzen. Also, we've gotten some questions online. In terms of air cooling, Noctua has announced 3 Threadripper-based air coolers, which are kind of cool. But other than that, there's not much air cooling. EK is working on a full block that's going to be gigantic. And I'm sure we're going to see a lot of really cool stuff coming up. But the socket is actually really nice, and we'll get into that in a little bit, how it just functions and ease of use. But we do have a question online from Christian on Facebook. Why would you need 128 gigs of RAM? And I think this is a good question to segue into. Why do you, people are hearing Threadripper, AMD has fantastic marketing. I think they've got Joss Whedon working for them, like Infinity, Fabric, and all this stuff. It's pretty great. The 128 gigs of RAM, the way that this platform works. As video editors, there's a lot of us here that do professional work. This platform is incredibly exciting. 16 cores, massive RAM support, 64 PCIe lanes. But who is going to be most excited about this?
I think it really breaks into that it's at its core, it's a true enthusiast platform. And I don't think it's about trying to always kind of fit a single user into a single bucket. Right? What we find generally with an enthusiast is many enthusiasts actually do a lot of things, right? You can find editors that are still actually doing a lot of advanced productivity on their system that isn't within their actually editing workflow. So it might not be inside of Resolve, it might not be inside of Premiere, right? It might not be inside of Vegas, right? At the same time, they also might be gamers. So maybe actually while something's rendering, maybe they want to jump into a game and play a little bit, right? I think that when you step into a platform like this, it's about enabling the flexibility to ensure that everything you're going to throw at it is going to be able to be comfortably running. When you talk at something about memory density, though, where memory density really comes into play is, again, about looking at things in new and interesting ways. Probably most users don't run things like virtual machines, but take, for instance, I use a virtual machine from a basic perspective on my enthusiast system because I do sandboxing for all my drivers and new applications and things like that. Why? Because sometimes a new driver, a new application, new update, it can cause a crash, it can cause issues. So I have a whole operating system that's running in a virtual machine that I can test my drivers in, run that, I keep it, 18 or 16 gigabytes worth of memory, so I can just do all kinds of playing around with that. And then if everything checks out with that, then I can actually do it to my legit, quote unquote, daily driver operating system, right? That's something that a normal enthusiast with this type of platform could do. And you get more enthusiasts or professionals or hobbyists, they might be running 2, 3, 4 VMs, right? Or like you said, professional content creators where they're doing not just 4K, 5K, maybe 8K editing. Maybe they're doing VR, multi-camera angle edits.
Yeah, and you hear stuff like 8K, and for the people that are listening, that's actually when you're getting into making VR movies, doing a lot of the content that's actually, you can buy in maybe an ASUS 360 camera, and actually stitch together content in a way that is actually, the system seeing it as 8K editing. So having this many cores is a very smart move, and that's why we've been seeing this adoption. Also VR in the future, the VR goggles, are moving towards from some of the implementations more core count, like six cores and up, because they're putting a lot more of the work onto the CPU rather than the GPU, which makes a lot of sense. So we're definitely seeing a lot more of that. With Threadripper, I think what people need to know is that there's the individual core counts. These are, or the core clocks are really high, and the benchmarks that are coming out are, in terms of like gaming and a lot of it, it's not giving up a lot of ground to the lower core count, higher clock CPUs that are out there. Sure, there's going to be this whole flux of what CPU is best for what, but because the CPU is just so gigantic and they're just giving so much space towards these huge boosted cores, the performance, whether it's individual core or multi-core, is still very impressive.
Yeah, no, it's very good. And one last point to add, I think, into the memory that's, we've also been looking at this for a long time on the HEDT platform. So on boards like the Zenith Extreme, you'll want to keep in mind we have value-added software that we include. So we have things like our RAM disk and our RAM cache software that's purposely designed for users that are looking for flexibility at how they can use high-density memory configurations. So take, for instance, like with the RAM disk, you could install your web browser straight to just memory and have that be in an actual disk. So instead of even installing it to your SSD or to your hard drive, it's going to run directly from system memory. And having a large amount of memory allows you flexibility to have a bigger RAM disk. And it is a perpetual RAM disk in the fact that essentially it offsets that to the SSD every time there's a reboot or shutdown. So it will always, quote unquote, be there. It's an actual physical volume. So that's a really cool option that you have available.
Now RAM prices just have to drop down.
If you're buying into this platform, definitely you probably have a little bit more disposable income. And again, that's really kind of what an enthusiast is looking for. I think they're looking for the best type of experience, the best type of components, and the best type of hardware, right? The other part too, the RAM cache software is interesting. It allows us to kind of have a combination of leveraging memory away from primary system memory, and then having that work in conjunction with things like SSDs for stabilizing, or actually SSDs, external drives, even internal HDDs to stabilize write consistency. So that there's less variance, so you can actually get better performance. It can also help to minimize the actual type of actual endurance issues that you sometimes have with certain SSDs, depending if you're going with kind of like a TLC or kind of like a low-grade MSE drive type of configurations. So there's a lot of flexibility actually comes about with this, and this is also part of the value proposition that we'll talk about as we get into these boards. But I think with that gives you hopefully a little bit of a basic perspective of kind of what you're getting now with Ryzen Threadripper, right? The number of cores, the threads, the frequency, does it support overclocking, DDR4, right? PCI lanes, right? So we got all those things. So let's go ahead and maybe take a look here at the box and give a little bit of perspective on the socket.
One of the great boards you got over there.
So take a look here and see how we open this up here.
So pull the tabs on the side.
Tabs on the side here, okay.
Yeah, live unboxing.
All right, let's take a look here. So,
by the way, this is some of the greatest packaging ever. Like when this thing arrived in the office, we were like, is this a CPU box? So we've been joking about whether or not we want to build a ITX little PC inside this thing. Personally, I want to do it, and JJ hinted that there's going to be a Threadripper ITX motherboard coming soon.
I said no such thing. I think
awesome,
for me personally, I think that I find that for this platform, I think ATX is definitely the way to go. There's even going to be people that have asked questions about, of course, why ASUS has done actually a design for all three of our motherboards that talk about being all eATX. So we're not even doing traditional ATX, which is a little bit smaller size. But we'll talk about that when we get more into our board design, because we really feel with an enthusiast platform like this, you care about expansion, you care about flexibility, you care about performance, right? And while I think we have set the precedence of compromising as little as possible when you go down to different form factors, whether it's micro ATX or mini ITX, it is definitely still, you ultimately do compromise in some respect. And with something like 60 PCI lanes alone from the CPU, right, and 64 in total, you're losing a huge amount of that going to a small board, right?
Yeah.
So something to keep in mind. So here we can see we've got the CPU, it's beautifully packaged right there. Very, very cool that AMD, of course, actually lists right on the actual IHS. So that's the integrated heat spreader. It actually says Ryzen Threadripper. Very, very, very cool.
And this is the packaging. So in here you have the mounting bracket, as you can see in there, as well as a Torx screwdriver.
So that's, I believe, it's a T20 Torx, and that's essentially required because if we get a little bit of a closer shot maybe here on one of these boards, be able to give you guys a little bit of context. So if we take a look right here, this is the actual socket. You can see that this is a different type of setup than what you have with Ryzen. So of course, the pins are in the socket, right? And the CPU is essentially just a bare pad, right? So you'll make your contact here. So you're going to use essentially the Torx screwdriver in a sequenced
Why
order.
don't we just go ahead and do it, actually? Let's do it.
I think it's a little bit harder. You won't be able to easily see, but I guess we can go ahead and try that for some people there. But there's a sequence pattern right here for people. Tells you essentially an open 3, 2, 1, so you will follow the essentially numerical sequence to be able to go ahead and open this up.
And the reason for this, for people that don't know, the high-end desktop platforms like Threadripper typically have the mounting system already built on the board because it is a higher price point, rather than what you see on some of the more consumer-grade boards, which leaves it up to the cooler manufacturers to come up with their own mounting structure. But this setup is very nice because it has little rails. It means that installation is way safer. There's a lot less you have to worry about.
Yeah, so one of the really cool things that they did is, of course, here you essentially have this kind of guide shim that's been implemented by AMD. And this is really brilliant because, of course, with such a large CPU, it can make it very difficult in terms of holding the CPU to be able to install it. And you would have a lot of concern whether you would damage something potentially. So once you essentially pull out the protection shim, you don't want to ever throw this away, just put it back inside the box. You essentially just want to kind of slide this guy in here. It'll slot into place. And then from there, you can set that back down. It'll set into place. And then you pretty much just take then that the Torx screwdriver, and then you follow the sequence in terms of closing. So it'll tell you 1, 2, 3. So it's the opposite order. So to open, you're going to go 3, 2, 1, and then to close, it's 1, 2, 3. At that point, you're good to go. And the great thing I really enjoy here for the Enthusiast platform is that they've made it simple to be able to ensure that you can feel confident in the installation process, and not only giving you the tool, but also giving you the actual shim to be able to make sure that you can get that guided in there correctly and efficiently. So I'm just going to tighten these up. And from there, you'd be pretty good to go. And at that point, once you're essentially using your cooling solution, all you would need to do is pretty much just prime on your socket, use your bracket, and you would be set. And you want to save that guy. So pretty a simple process in terms of kind of how the installation goes.
Cool. Let's go ahead and hold that up or prop it up so people can see how big that CPU is in there. And by the way, this is a big board. This is an EATX board, so it is the Zenith. It is the premium one. But that CPU is just gigantic.
So let me just finish kind of torquing this down. But I think actually that gives us a kind of good segue to now kind of go ahead and jump a bit more into really the boards and kind of a lot of what we're doing here in terms, I think, of really offering a great experience. So when you talk about really, I think, such a high-end CPU like this, there's a lot of different things to keep in mind how we can try to really make sure to give you the best experience possible. And so one of the key things that we were looking to really implement was not restricting, I think, any one of the key aspects of, one, the overclocking capabilities that the CPU was going to allow for. That's going to be one. We wanted to try to make sure that you had a great overclocking experience. Two, offer a lot of high-performance integrated connectivity, because we have a huge amount of PCI Express lanes to be able to leverage so that we can put in tons of stuff and not have essentially different things be shut off, right? And then also allow for complementary technologies and controls that allow you to get the best experience from that. So that might be things like fan controls and things along those lines, right?
So can you touch on one of the points about AMD versus like previous AMD boards? These new ones have all the features that are found across, not all the features, but these are mature boards. They have a lot of stuff that's exciting. Previous AMD boards, left some people wanting other features that weren't found on.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you might go to the 900 series, you might have found that you might find some users that felt that there was maybe the most advanced type of features and functions on maybe, let's say, the Intel series of chipsets and motherboards. And definitely our commitment to AMD when they announced Ryzen and with the announcement of 370 series chipset, B350 chipset, and now the X399 was to say, we want to put out the absolute best boards possible, and we don't want to hold back in any respect. So that means whether it was going to be the PCB components, the cooling design, the onboard specification support, all of that was going to be top of the line to truly be able to align with the level of commitment that AMD's been put into the actual CPU.
So this is a ROG Extreme board. It's the Zenith,
Yep.
but it is, lives up to the name ROG Extreme.
Yeah, so this is going to be the first board that we're going to talk about. So this is the Zenith Extreme. So this is the most expensive board that we're going to be offering for the X399 based chipset. It takes on a new naming scheme though, so Zenith has never been offered before. Prior to that, the highest end boards that we offered for AMD were the Crosshair, and we've had an update to the Crosshair. We had the Crosshair 6.0. We had now coming out is the Crosshair 6 Hero Wi-Fi Edition. And then we have a brand new board, which will be available very shortly with the Crosshair 6 Extreme. This is even kind of on a whole nother level because of just the number of spec and features. So from the first perspective, a lot of people care about aesthetics. So this follows kind of the tried and true mantra that you've seen with ROG and Strix series motherboards. We've got a beautiful, clean, monochromatic color scheme. So you got black, silver, gray tones. You can see that that really complements the type of build configuration that we have going on here. The goal was ultimately with this type of design aesthetic was to make sure that it doesn't contend or compete with the colors that you want to define, whether it's with the integrated lighting on board or whether it's through accessories that you're going to be adding on or components you want to add on. We wanted this essentially to just be a great base so that you could create either a nice complementary color scheme that's in the same tones or create nice contrast, but there shouldn't be anything that contends against your choice to be able to define color, right?
I love the fact that it's not just because it's AMD, it's a bright red board.
Well, you can definitely add in your red accents and make it look awesome. So one of the other unique aspects that this board is going to feature is if we get a little bit tight in right here, is that this board features an integrated OLED display. So this actually allows for some really cool functionality on the board. What this will allow you to do is you can monitor things like temperature, voltage, you can put in your own custom GIFs, you can put in your own custom text. So it's a really cool way to kind of just further individualize your system. Now, if we cut over, of course, here to our demo system that we've got set up here, you'll see, of course, we're highlighting RGB integration. ASUS was the first board vendor to implement native RGB on a motherboard, and we've really pushed the industry further, and we now have the most comprehensive ecosystem for RGB lighting and control. So this board in itself is going to feature 3 headers. You're going to feature 2 4-pin traditional 50-50 RGB headers. So that's going to be for traditional things like LED strips, chassis, any standard items like that.
Those are the 12-volt 4-pin headers.
And then you've got the new RGB addressable headers. And we are right now just releasing with partnership with Cable Mods, the first PC-centric RGB addressable LED strips that are fully ASUS Aura certified as well. So either which way, whether you want to go addressable or you want to go with traditional LED strips, you can. Now, this system right here, we'll get a little bit later into kind of all the nuts and bolts of what it's broken out. But to give you some context of what you can now synchronize, graphics card can be fully synchronized. The chassis has full synchronization for its integrated LED lighting. These fans right here are actually fan grills that Silverstone developed. These are actually grills that you can use on any fans, but that also fully support ASUS Aura Sync. Then we have these beautiful DIMMs from Team Group. They're not only great looking, but they're high performance DDR4, and these fully also support Aura Sync. These are their Delta RGB DIMMs. So that you can pretty much see that just about any component that you're looking for, of course, even including things like our peripherals, even upcoming monitors and headsets, all support synchronization and control. And for this board generation, we're also releasing an update that will allow you to have even more granularity control, where you can use actually targeted color codes for defining the actual RGB spectrum. Will allow for more control flexibility in defining brightness. So before, pretty much when you would set it, you would have it at a fixed brightness level, but now you can actually control that. And will also even allow you to actually have more control for things like the temperature adjustments. So you can actually define your own colors for temperature reflection if that's what you want for your system. And the last note that I'll make is probably one of the most exciting things is that we've now formally released our Aura SDK software. So this is now essentially an initiative to allow programmers, hardware developers, the community as a whole to have access to essentially our API, so that if they want to code directly for ASUS Aura, they can do that. So this could mean things like game developers sequencing in their lighting to tie directly into that. So when you're playing a game, the lights maybe reflect action sequences or health stats, all kinds of interesting things. So there'll be a lot of really cool things over the coming months you'll continue to see from Aura in terms of its flexibility and functionality of what it can afford you.
Yeah, so for people who are familiar with the maker scene, individually addressable LEDs have been around for a little bit of time. You can do all sorts of really cool projects. The compatibility should be fairly similar to, I've already played around with some of the LED strips from that are not made for gaming, but more for PCs, but are made for DIY projects, and it is incredibly cool. Like, this is the future of lighting.
Yeah.
And I just can't wait to see this change, because what it means is, yeah, sure, we have RGB PCs running around like it's a unicorn explosion in here, but this will give us a lot more control, us being the entire PC industry, control over how things look, and can be more mature, and just gives it a much higher end level of control. So not everything has to be a rainbow all the time.
But you know, I disagree with that statement, though, to actually a pretty specific point, in that what we find actually for most users, even for system builds like myself, is that what RGB is about is defining, I think, a color palette that you find. For demonstration purposes here, we just have it sequencing through this, but I find almost no users at all that will ever run a fixed color cycle pattern. Most people want to fix into, you know, they're going to do blue, they're going to do orange, they're going to do red. So they want to be able to essentially have that flexibility of figuring things out. I think our control software also having the flexibility to have targeted zone controls does make things kind of interesting. Like, I've done builds in the past where I've had 2 zone targeting colors, so that maybe like green and blue, so it's a complementary color aesthetic. And I think that's what addressable LEDs will be most interesting allow for, is just allow for more gradation and subtlety, as opposed to, I think that right now you can have really clean and stylized looks just with general accent or ambient lighting, but definitely I think the flexibility that a fully addressable strip will allow for is going to be quite impressive, and we're really excited to be able to offer that on boards. So as we move over on kind of taking a look at some of the other aspects on the extreme, one thing that's going to be very, very critical is going to be the overclocking experience. And so when people talk about, you know, that all motherboards essentially equal the same overclocking experience, it's all about the silicon lottery. Definitely, the silicon lottery, if you're not familiar, is a term that essentially defines that the margin that's built into the CPU in terms of how much you can get out varies. And that's true. You can get a CPU that might be 3.9 gigahertz is its maximum, and then another one might get to 4 or 4.1 gigahertz. You don't necessarily have control over that, but what you do have influence is picking a motherboard that will give you the stability and reliability, and also the design to be able to maximize overclocking capabilities. And so at ASUS, we've really taken this to heart to make sure that these boards offer top-notch overclocking. So this happens in a couple of key ways. The first one is going to be, of course, what we call the VRM components. So we can get a little bit tighter in here and be able to kind of show you guys some perspective on some of these components in a second. But when we take a look at a broad level, what the VRM components are going to be your capacitors. You're then going to have your inductors, or what is sometimes called your chokes. And then you're going to have what are called the power stages, which are generally the MOSFETs and the drivers. So in an RG board like this, this is absolutely super top shelf. 10K rated capacitors, power IR stages, and then from there you have what are called microalloy fine inductors. So that means that we actually even, when we mix the actual inductor material to be able to form it, it's super packed in, and this allows us to have higher performance and higher overall efficiency for that part, and also better temperature performance. Now, when you talk about the CPU, there's no way escaping that while AMD has done an amazing job to be extremely efficient, you're still talking that as you overclock this and you push this, you're going to be talking about a lot of current that you're going to be pulling through the motherboard, and ultimately the power that we would require for the system. And this is where a strong, not only VRM in terms of the components itself come into play, but also how you manage that thermals. And so we've done a couple of really interesting things in this regard. All the boards that we're going to talk about will feature a 2-stage design in terms of their VRM heatsink. So if we talk about that, here's at the top one portion of the VRM heatsink, and then directly underneath this I/O shroud, there's actually another full heatsink. It's a finned traditional heatsink, kind of like if you went back in time and looked at old motherboards, or if you look at like a tower heatsink, that's pretty much what it looks like. There's a heatsink in there, and it is connected by a heat pipe, which, let me see if I can tilt this guy here and maybe give you guys a little bit of a shot so you can see. Right here, there is the heat pipe that connects one heatsink here to then the secondary heatsink. And if we go back over to the motherboard itself, then the really interesting part is if we get a little bit tight in here, you're going to see that there's venting. Well, why would you have venting on the I/O shroud? The reason why is we have a built-in VRM assist fan. So that provides direct targeted airflow to that finned heatsink to give us outstanding VRM performance. This is one of the reasons why I think that AMD really loved working with us to be able to have something like the Zenith Extreme, because it really allows for just an amazing experience. And the great thing is that you're going to see this same type of 2-stage heat pipe design with active cooling on the Strix board as well as on the Prime board. So regardless of whether you're a gamer, you're an overclocker, you're a modder, you're somebody that's a streamer, you're in between, whatever your usage might be, whichever board you're going to pick, you can feel confident in not only the component quality, but in the cooling design that we have.
Yeah, and for people that are wondering, these CPUs are at 180 watts is what they come. And once you start overclocking, then you're going to be pulling a lot more. So this is a very powerful system. Now, they're very efficient for what they are.
Yes.
But 180 those are big numbers. The normal ones around 90, 92, 95. The non-overclockable CPUs are more like 65. So 180 is gigantic.
Yeah, so you definitely, that's part of the purpose of why we focused on doing this. And also part of the reason why AMD really recommends high performance cooling solutions. And so really all the products that you're seeing that they're recommending that support things like the bracket and even the solutions like Noctua, none of these are entry level cooling solutions. You really want to prime this with a high quality product to be able to ensure that you're going to get great thermals and you're going to get great acoustics, because you also want a quiet system that runs great. And for some of you that are also wondering, AMD has continued to be able to implement what's called an offset-based mechanism for the temperature reporting. It's, I believe, 27 degrees. So you do want to count that when the temperature is being read by the utility. Ideally, we'd recommend our ASUS application, or of course you can use the Ryzen Master utility, or HWinfo. All of these, or AIDA64, have been validated to account for the offset. If you use a non-validated application, though, your temperature reporting might look incorrect, and you might think that there might be something off.
So we have a question online regarding the Zenith with the Prime. So what are some of the differences? I mean, a lot of what you've been talking about are what makes the Zenith Extreme so great.
Yep.
People are wondering, when are the Zeniths going to come in stock on Newegg?
So I think we'll get more direct into the Prime in a little bit, where we'll talk specifically about that in general. So we'll give you a more kind of compared contrast. But I definitely think you'll see that board packs in quite a bit, and you're not going to feel like you're compromising amount. I think the Zenith Extreme is really for users that are just looking for everything. They want the absolute best of everything. In terms of availability, definitely you can feel confident that we're going to have weekly shipments with places like Newegg, so you can feel confident that you'll be able to get the board. But definitely, I think from a pre-order perspective, if you didn't get your boards pre-ordered, you're probably out of luck, and you're probably going to have to wait until the following week for the next round of shipments.
So they were in stock. We had a lot of them, but they've been so crazy popular.
Yeah.
Same thing with the CPUs, that they just sold out. So more coming.
A next kind of continuing point that we have here is, if we want to get a little bit tight in here at the corner of the board, this is going to be another unique aspect of our design on our X390N series, and this is going to be dual CPU power connections. So traditionally on most enthusiast motherboards, you might just see one. So I'm going to cover one, and that's what you would see. You would probably see like an 8-pin power connection, right? But we actually have 2 on the board. Some of the other boards might only feature like an 8 and then a 4, but it still features an auxiliary connection. And the reason why is that as you overclock and you're pulling more current, you essentially want to be able to consistently be able to not strain that connection. And so we've put essentially auxiliary power connections to be able to ensure that we can maximize not holding back the Ryzen processor, Threadripper specifically, especially when you overclock it and you want to get the best performance possible. We also added in some secret sauce design from our WS series. So many of you that are ASUS followers might be familiar that ASUS has had a long and high-end series of workstation series motherboards. Workstation products are different than for traditional products. While we stand 100% behind our traditional products and they're designed to the best in the industry in terms of the design standards, WS products, we even put some specialized design applications which are really meant for professionals that might have continual workloads. So an example is a professional workstation might never go offline, right? Your normal system, if you probably measured how much you're generally using it, even at 100%, it might be a few hours in the day, right? Maybe let's even say aggressively 8 hours if you're like a heavy streamer or something like that, right? But in a workstation system, it could consistently be running 10 hours, 12 hours, 14 hours, maybe even 24 hours. So we developed actually what was called a ProCool design implementation. Now you guys are not going to be able to see it because we probably won't be able to get too tight into this header, but the actual internal wiring, the pin interface material here, is actually a thicker gauge. And we've done that on each one of these boards. So this is not a traditional internal pin. This allows for less resistance and actually better performance. And also reduces the actual temperature for the contacts between the power connection lead and the actual CPU power connection in itself. And so then again, this is about making sure that we can offer the best experience possible for overclocking and for long-term stability, especially when you have 16 threads, 16 cores and 32 threads, and you're lading that consistently. You want to be able to feel confident that you're not also straining your power supply and getting the best experience possible. So that is something you're going to find consistent on all these boards.
So online, there are some questions about workstation boards. Would you recommend that people that are in workstation, Threadripper, that they should pick up the Zenith?
I think actually for me, any one of the boards would I think be a great choice. Personally, I think that we recommend generally the Prime Series board for a lot of the kind of professionals or prosumers or content creators. And when we get to that board, I think one, the aesthetic. Well, this is a beautiful aesthetic, and I think a lot of professionals would like just the pure black look. The main thing that you're going to find on the ROG boards is that we include a lot of gaming software that maybe a content creator might not use. So there might be like packet priority software for gaming applications, right? We have specialized VR audio sync software to allow you to kind of synchronize this to a Vive or to an Oculus so that you can take the same type of DSP adjustments for audio and listen to that in VR in real time. So some really cool options that a content creator might not use, right?
Well, I think is this the 10G?
Yes.
This comes along with in the box with that, right?
Yeah.
So this is something that I think a lot of content creators would actually.
Yeah, you're 100% right. But we do offer, you could still buy the Prime, take for instance, at a lower price point, and we do now optionally sell our 10G add-in card by itself. So they could technically buy the 10G add-in card with the Prime and still be under the price point of the Zenith Extreme. So again, I think it's about balancing, finding the right decision for what complements your needs. Cool. So as we kind of go to the next part here, we already talked about that board features up to 3600 DDR4 megahertz support, so 8 channels. These feature our QDIMM design, so that also means that this is really cool because it's open-ended, so it's just a single latch, makes it very simple. You got all the standard things you would expect in terms of like power, reset, clear CMOS. Where we get to some things that are a little bit more interesting, I think, is let's take a look here quickly at the back I/O. And this is always going to be kind of one of the areas where you'll see that there's a bit more differentiation between the different boards that are out there. So one interesting thing you're going to see right now when I show you is another industry first that ASUS developed, and this was an integrated I/O shield. So if you are a first-time builder, you may never have known the pain of installing your system and not including the I/O shield in your build.
Happens to everyone the first time.
So a lot of people make that mistake, but seasoned veterans always know it's the first thing you do the moment that you get your chassis open, because once you mount your motherboard, you can never go back retroactively and put your I/O shield. So we did it for you. We did it at the factory. Not only is this simplified this and it gives you a truly premium class of product, but more impressive is that actually that the direct contact and the sealing that we can create. Many people don't understand that the I/O shield isn't just there for an aesthetic perspective, but it actually helps to block ESD, so electrostatic discharge. There are 2 forms of electrostatic discharge: air discharge and contact discharge. We have a significant improvement in the performance that we can offer for ESD because of the close bonding that we can make directly with this material straight to the actual I/O backplane itself, as opposed to our I/O shield, which actually is a custom I/O shield that we patented that has actually a special EMI and ESD material to help to reduce it. It's still great and it's fantastic, but this is even kind of the next version of it.
Yeah, so it just keeps you from nuking your system and a lot of other nasties. Also, we actually have the board installed here, and you can see, pull this guy out, some very cool light up.
Yeah. I don't know if they'll be able to see it, but that is another
Can
really.
we swing this guy around?
Yes. Another really cool feature you'll see is that the I/O itself actually is lit up.
There we go.
Yeah. So when you're going back there and you got to plug in your audio and everything, you can actually see that each individual channel is lit up correctly, and it's even color coded to what it should be, right? So generally, green is going to be your line out, right, connection for your speakers or for your headphones. Microphone is red generally. So it's a really cool kind of subtle way, again, about increasing that premium perspective.
Or a sync right there.
Yeah. So going to the back here, again, if we can get in tight here, we'll give you guys the run through in terms of kind of all the key I/O. So at the top, you've got your clear CMOS button. That's straightforward. Of course, allows you to just reset the board back defaults. We've got our USB BIOS flashback button. So the USB BIOS flashback is really, really cool because that allows you to take if you want to pass me that flash drive, for instance, I can take my flash drive, I can plug it in to the USB slot, and then press this button, and then I don't actually have to have the CPU installed. I don't have to have the memory installed. I don't even have to have the graphics card installed. All I need is just the actual 24-pin power, right? I need the CPU and the 24-pin power. I press this button and I can directly low-level update the motherboard. It's a very, very handy utility for just getting your system first set up and getting it updated correctly. Or in some rare situations, you can have surges, sags, brownouts, different things like that that can corrupt the actual chip. And instead of having to send your board in, you can attempt to overwrite it and recover it and get it back up and running. So it's a really awesome feature that the boards have in common there. Now, directly below that, you're going to see that this board features integrated Wi-Fi. So we're giving you the absolute best Wi-Fi in the industry here. You've got integrated 802.11ac 2x2 dual band based Wi-Fi that already in the real world can legitimately be 2 to 4 times faster than 10100 Ethernet. So it's very, very good quality, very high performance. Industry first though, again with ASUS and with a board like this, and this is a really big differentiation point between something like the Strix or the Prime, is it has integrated 802.11ad based Wi-Fi, or what some people might be calling WiGig. So this is 60 gigahertz in terms of the actual operating frequency. In real world, not theoretically, this is legitimately in a factor of 2 to 4 times faster than even 802.11ac Wi-Fi, right? You can actually legitimately see gigabit class wireless performance. It's very, very impressive. The range is going to be shorter than that of 802.11ac, but if you have your desk set up, your kind of primary room, you got your router. Like for me, I have my router in my same area where I have my high-end desktop. It's a great option to cut any cords right there, but I have extremely low latency, extremely high throughput. It's an industry first, extremely impressive in terms of that functionality, and there's the potential to even have some future support. There are some next generation headsets that might come to market in terms of wireless VR, which might have interoperability. We don't know 100%, but it's awesome that when you adopt into a board like this, we're giving you the absolute best spec possible.
That's right. So AD is for long range, WiGig is for the nearish.
AC is for long range, still
AC,
very good
AC,
speed,
yes,
and then
AC.
AD, shorter range, but absolute the fastest speed. But ultimately, the choice is up to you. Of course, to maximize AD, you do need a compatible AD-based router, either which way, you're covered on here. Now, in terms of the secondary networking, as we kind of move down here, we'll get to that in a moment, but with the high number of PCIe Express lanes here, you can see that we've got our USB ports. So you've got all the blue, so those are going to be all your USB 3.1 base Gen 1, and then we've also have Gen 2, which is awesome. You've got Type-C support on there as well. You've got an Intel Gigabit NIC on there with our packet priority software. Unlike some other options in the industry that might use something like, let's say, Killer, the great thing about our packet priority software is that it's network controller agnostic. That means it can work with the wireless, it can work with the wired, or if you want to pass me over that 10G adding card, if you want to show it there. This is the other really cool addition that the Zenith Extreme comes with, is it comes with the ROG 10G add-in card. So this is an awesome, truly high performance, and this is, when you talk about numbers, it doesn't get better than this. 10 times faster than gigabit, right? It's 10G. So absolutely monstrous. This comes included in the box, can also work with our Game First packet priority software. And the actual chipset that's utilized in here, the cool thing is that it allows you to use traditional Cat5e cable and still get up to 5G speeds. So you don't even have to have the most expensive specialized cables, which are required for 10G operation, to even be able to get faster performance than just 1G.
Now, so for packet priority, is the simple way to describe it that if someone in your house is streaming Game of Thrones and you're gaming, then you take priority?
So you can't control that unless your router has that. Our software can work in conjunction with a router, of course. Optimally, an ASUS router would be great. What packet priority control helps you to manage your scenario from your personal system is when there's a lot of active things that are running. So maybe you're downloading stuff through your browser. Maybe you've got a peer-to-peer application
So you're
running.
streaming Game of Thrones.
Right. Yeah, you're doing different things, but then you jump
browser
into a
watch.
game, right?
Yep.
You might want to jump into Overwatch and make sure that you're getting the lowest latency and the best ping. So you can prioritize that and then make sure that anything else that's running, right, even Steam updates in the background, who knows, whatever else might be running, gets essentially throttled down to make sure that it doesn't compromise your experience. And that could be for music, movies, games, whatever it might be. And for our latest generation, there is automatic technology that we could do to do auto prioritization. So it's dynamic. If you jump into kind of a game, we're intelligent enough to know game is in the forefront, that's what you want to prioritize. But you can manually control all this.
Right.
Now, moving down from there, we then, of course, have an optical out, and then we have, of course, multi-channel line level audio, rounding out the audio connection. Now, when we take a look at the audio on this board, this features the Supreme Effects audio design, so that means it's a fully isolated audio design, right? It's separated to be able to ensure that the audio codec, the S2-1220, performs as high as it can. We use a high-end, actually, audio precision equipment. It's very expensive, tens of thousands of dollars, to be able to actually measure 8 different aspects of signal noise performance to be able to make sure that we can really give you great signal noise ratio, THG, crosstalk, a lot of different things. We then pair that with audio-grade capacitors. There's a high-performance op-amp, an operational amplifier, which helps to give you punch, improved soundstage for your headphones. And then we also have ESS Saber DAC that's been implemented on here. Like we've set the precedence, we were the first to implement that on any board, and we've had that in a couple of our higher-end ROG. This one's a little bit special because it uses the 1918, which is even a higher grade version than kind of the traditional, more basic ESS Saber DACs that are offered on there. So a very, very high-grade audio package that's on here. And we also still maintain things like our sonic sense impedance detection. So when you plug in your headphones, we'll automatically set it to the correct output strength so that you get a great experience.
Yeah, this thing is legit. For people that are listening, ESS Saber DACs, that's audiophile quality. And the impedance matching on the headphones, it works both with your front header as well as the back. And it is, I've used it, it's pretty awesome. It goes, oh, your headphones are 300 ohms.
Yep.
Like, and set that automatically for it.
Yeah,
and it provides enough juice for it. So you have a high-end headphone amp
you could hear it
in the board, which is legit. That's awesome.
No, it's very cool. I mean, the goal here is to make sure that users can get a great experience for their music, movies, and games right out of the box. And definitely the software package, a lot of you guys sometimes don't pay attention to it. You might gloss over it. But Sonic Studio Suite's got some really cool options at customizing things like bass, treble, frequency response, a lot of really cool options. We have Casting Enhancer, which can do DSP process filtering for incoming and outgoing audio, so you can make your TeamSpeak, your Ventrilo, all that stuff sound cleaner and better. And we even have our latest link to VR syncing. So that allows us to take a lot of our advanced post-processing technologies and apply that to the VR headset. So that's cool because you can just hit a button and synchronize all those options. So very, very cool in terms of the audio design. So rounding out just a couple of last things before I think we move on to one of the next boards. You know, you've got Safe Slot Design, which is, of course, our fully molded implementation of structural rigidity improvement to the slots on all of these, because of course this board has really kind of been primed for multi-GPU expansion focus. This board is also going to feature some very specialized storage-based implementation. You got your standard SATA, woohoo, right? You know, that's great. You got U.2, which is great to give you performance for the next generation of high-performance-based SSDs. You got your front USB 3.0 there. You have front USB 3.1 header, which is specific for the latest generation of chassis. But then people always ask about, well, what about M.2, right?
It's not on the board. It's gone. Where'd it go?
It's gone. It's not here. Well, no. ASUS has been committed to make sure that M.2 is done right, thermally isolated to make sure that it gets the best performance possible. So a lot of times other vendors, you'll see that they're going to put the M.2 slots like right underneath this PCI Express slot. Well, guess what? If you do that, we take a look right here, again, on our high-end system that we've built. Where's my graphics card sit? My graphics card sits directly over that slot.
You get thermal throttling on your big fancy NVMe SSD.
Yeah, whatever you're going to throw in there. You know, even if you might have quote-unquote cooling solutions, depending on how they might test the cooling solution, maybe they tested the graphics card down here and they tested it not here. So
it's a bit of shade. I don't know
it's interesting design choices. You know, for us, we try to make it more kind of sensible and go, we know everybody's going to install the graphics card here, so let's not put it where there's going to be heat pulling. So what you're going to have is Zenith Extreme gives you 3 M.2. You've got one right here under the PCH, right, where it actually has an M.2 heatsink, so it's a full high-performance heatsink, makes contact right there. You can mount it there. Where things get interesting, though, is, of course, going to be in the DIMM.2. So I think you have it right there. Why don't you go ahead and show people this off. This is actually the second version of this, the DIMM.2. It's brand new for the Zenith Extreme. We retooled it where we actually gave it cutouts for more airflow. We then have actually temperature input sensors so that you can have your fans respond directly to that. And there's also direct mounting points so that you can go ahead and put an assist fan directly over that to cool them directly. And you can mount 2 M.2 fans on that. So fully...
So you have one M.2 over here and then another one on this side.
On that side. So absolutely monster. I can show you know how that pretty much goes into the board. If we take this slot right here, you'll see it installs very similarly, kind of like some memory on a system. And now you've got your M.2 drives, but installed, that's why we call it DIMM.2. It installs almost like system memory. But the great thing is, if we go back here to our car system, we can see right here, what do we have? Oh, that's some beautiful RGB goodness, right, with our fans. But you have your front intake fans. So traditionally, with this type of configuration, of course, the airflow, where is it going to go? It's going to blow across this type of system, right, in this direction. So, of course, you can see here in my demo system right here, I've got a DIMM.2 installed with 2 Samsung 960 Pro NVMe SSDs. So extremely high performance based SSDs, but I got the airflow directly passing across there, right? And even if you wanted more Depending on how you set up your top fans, whether you have them set as an exhaust or as an intake, you could even have a directional downflow airflow to also pass across your memory and your M.2, even further giving you great thermal performance. So,
yeah, and this is one of those things for people online who are wondering, like, hey, this seems weird, what's the point? No one else does this. This actually matters. The new generation of NVMe SSDs, I mean, these things can get warm. There's a reason people are working with thermal solutions.
Yeah, and they're only going to get faster. Right?
Faster. Yeah.
They're not getting any slower. They're only going to continue to go faster.
So this is a great cooling solution. It makes a ton of sense because you can also RAID them together, right?
You can do RAID. This platform, as of right now, does not support NVMe bootable RAID solution, but you can do RAID-based configurations. So last note here, I think, is going to be cooling. And keep in mind that a lot of what we're going to be that we've touched on is going to be very similar here. So we'll touch on just the specific differences that exist on those boards as we get there. But it's going to be something that I think is critical in a high-end configuration, which is going to be fan controls and connectivity. So this board's just packed with a huge amount of fan headers. All these fan headers feature what's called FanXpert 4 technology. So we have DC and PWM output support. So that means you can support 3-pin fans, 4-pin fans. We can automatically calibrate the fans, figure out their minimum speed. We can figure out their maximum speed. You can do things like temperature input mapping, which is really cool because traditionally, when we go back again to our reference system, when you talk about the way that fans respond, fans traditionally only respond to just the CPU temperature. But the disadvantage of doing that is that in most situations, this is actually running pretty cool. Even though this is a monster CPU, you got your 16 threads, 16 cores, 32 threads, right? Most situations, unless you're running professional, demanding 100% workloads, probably that CPU is running somewhere between 40 to 60% loads. Temperatures are going to be fairly well regulated, especially with a high-performance cooling solution like this. So the GPU, more often than not, will be the hottest running part of your system. So ASUS allows you to actually change the fan's response input, and it can respond to the GPU temperature. So these fans, you could set it respond to this temperature, and when that ramps up, these will ramp up accordingly.
As long as it's an ASUS GPU.
Actually, for any GPU.
Oh, that's supported now.
Yes, it is.
And so this is actually something that's really awesome.
It's going to look best with an ASUS GPU, but any graphics.
Yeah.
Right?
So this is one of these things that if you own an ASUS board currently and you haven't done FanXpert or run the automatic profile or mess around with it, it is really, really great, not just for the performance and dialing it in, but how quiet you can get it. People who haven't built a PC in a while see these new PCs and they're like, is this thing on?
Yeah.
I mean, it's all lit up, but should there be fans? Shouldn't it be running loud? And you're like, no. Things have changed.
Yeah, and that's actually a really good point too, is that because we can do the calibration, we can set something that's called extreme quiet mode, which that means that when there's very essentially little load or little work, it's the same type of technology we have in our high performance graphics cards. If you're just surfing the internet, all the fans turn off. There's no reason for them to consume power or produce noise. But the moment that you jump into something more demanding, the fans will ramp accordingly and you'll be good to go. The last point that I'll make here is that Zenith Extreme is a little bit more special in that it comes with a couple of accessories. So one is going to be that it will come included with our fan extension card. So this is an accessory you can buy actually on Newegg. It works actually on all our boards. But this will give you an additional 3 fan headers. It can work as a PWM splitter board. So if you just wanted to kind of multiplex out a signal and all the fans mirror that same thing, you can do that. You can have 3 independent fans. You can also put 3 more additional temp sensors. And it can work in conjunction with the same fan controls on the motherboard, both in the UEFI as well as from the software.
Oh, so one moment, there's a ton of questions. Previously, we did a NZXT Manta build. Actually, not that model, is a black version. But people are wondering, how do you connect all these fans with all these RGB fans?
Yep.
That's the answer right there.
So fan extension card is an option like that, but also remember that because we have pure PWM output, that allows you to take actually, let's say, take for instance like here, and this system, that's actually how I did wire it, is that I actually only have 1 fan. So I used a fan splitter cable, and I ran it to a chassis fan header, and then I output that, and these are all PWM cables. So then you could power that, let's say, from the power supply, but they're all controlled just from 1 header. So you got a lot of flexibility. You could use something like the fan extension card, the native headers. And then for the water cooling enthusiasts, we don't want to forget you guys. We've got you all the water cooling stuff you could possibly do. We have a custom water sensor header on here that will be partners for, like, let's say like EK, where they have a water block where they can do leak monitoring, flow monitoring, temperature monitoring. It's all integrated into 1 header. So they put the block and the board will monitor all those things for you. We have temperature inlet monitoring. So if you want to monitor the actual temperature for your water flow, you can do that built onto the motherboard. You're also going to have, of course, dedicated headers for things like water pumps or closed loop AI cooling solution pumps. It's all built onto this board. So that water cooling zone technology is something that's exclusive on something like, let's say, the Extreme, where you could still do totally water cooling with the other boards, but there's going to be more specialized headers that you're going to find on something like the Zenith Extreme as compared to some of the other boards.
And you're going to see a lot more people actually using that, and a lot more third-party blocks supporting this, because the 180-watt TDP for these CPUs just are begging for water cooling.
Well, it's going to look awesome, and the thermal performance. So yeah, you're definitely going to be covered kind of in all the regards. So all the way around, just definitely, I mean, a beastly board, and there's really, I mean, nothing that you could really ask for. Just about every key spec function feature is on this board. So I think that, you know, enthusiasts, you guys are going to love it. And for the last kind of, I guess, cherry on the cake before we get to the last board, you can see right here, we've got a beautiful, of course, backplate. You know, we set the precedence. We were the first ones to ever do it. This looks really nice, of course, with the side fill lighting that the board also features. And actually included with the board, I'll throw it in there, is for you guys that don't like card sag, you even get with the Zenith Extreme, this little guy. This is just cool. You know, I just got showed off just because it just is so cool looking. But this is a special actually brace. It will come included with your Zenith Extreme. So right here, we pretty much have no card sag because we designed the card with a large amount of rigidity. But if we go over to our build, if you wanted to, essentially, you just put it in like this, and bam, it's going to stop your card from sagging.
It's pretty nice.
So nice little add-on. So definitely, I think the value proposition for this board. Keep in mind, you know, we've got limited time, but this board has got pretty much just about everything you could ask for. So here, this is the new guy. This is the new guy. Now, we had already made announcements for the Zenith Extreme and for the Prime-A, but nobody knew about this guy, essentially.
It's not even skewed up on Newegg.
Yes, and it'll be coming. A lot of you guys will be, when can I get it? Well, in the not too distant future.
Do we have a price point on this yet?
Not confirmed 100%, but it'll be in that kind of price point-ish of around the Prime. So it'll be a more aggressively priced board in terms of kind of giving you still great performance, great feature set, right? But definitely at a lower price point. Because it's our Strix series. So Strix series, it's about kind of being like you know, what we say is ROG-derived kind of features and functions, right? ROG is always going to take the precedent of the absolute best. And with Strix, we want to give you an amazing focused gaming experience, right? But also trying to hit that great balance of kind of trying to give you everything you could really want, but not necessarily taking it to more specialized technologies, let's say like AD or the 10G or water cooling, specific base connections, which are more kind of specific to niche type of targeted users, right? Here we want to try to hit a wider swath of kind of the core traditional PC DIY enthusiasts.
Now, so the price on the Asus ROG Extreme, the Zenith is $549,
Yep.
while the Prime-A on the far end there, the light-colored board is $349. And obviously, if you buy one today, JJ will sign it for you, special edition.
I like that. I can do that. If you guys want that, let me know. Let me know. We'll hook you up. So,
Someone asked for it. Someone asked for it.
So to recap here, you know, beautiful high-quality digital PWM design, two-stage heatsink with the heat pipe. VRM assist fan is also there. 8-channel memory design. The dual power connection, still with the ProCool based power lead. Still features the Fan Expert class fan controls. Has support for the fan extension card, but it doesn't come with it in the box, right? Doesn't have the dedicated kind of water cooling headers as far as like the temperature inlet monitoring, things along those lines. But you still have, you know, the closed loop AIO water cooling header. So you still have pretty much the same exact class of fan controls in terms of the functionality, just not some of the more specialized control headers. Still features, of course, Asus Aura support. This one is actually brand new. It's the first time that this Strix series board features integrated PCH RGB lighting for the ROG Eye here. Normally, this has always just kind of been not lit up. But for this generation, you will actually have this built in. You do have your Aura RGB headers. So this one still features 3, just like the Zenith Extreme. So 2 50/50, and then you got your addressable LED strip. 2, you have less total safe slots, 1, 2, 3, versus the Zenith Extreme had 4. There's a little bit of difference in that regard. You still get your front USB 3.1. You get your front USB 3.0, U.2, and SATA. And then, of course, for M.2, again, you might not see it on the board, but it's about thermal isolation. So what did we do? We have a vertical M.2 right here. So you just slot that M.2 drive in there right there. And then
it's a little skyscraper M.2 that Asus has been doing for a little bit.
Great, same thing, front intake airflow, and then also you've got your M.2 heatsink right here. So you still have that option for dual M.2 support. On the audio side, still very high grade. The main differential is, of course, no ESS Saber DAC, but still the S21220 audio codec, audio grade capacitors, the Sonic Sense impedance, still have an operational amplifier, so still very high quality audio, same audio suite as well, just a little bit toned down in terms of the total kind of quality and performance that you would have on the higher end board. When we take a look here at the I/O, you can see this board is still quite rich in terms of what you're going to get. So if we take a look right here, you've got your USB BIOS flashback button. So that's that, no CPU, no memory, no graphics card flashing for the UEFI BIOS. Then you have integrated 802.11ac dual band Wi-Fi. So no AD, but you still get that super fast, high range 802.11ac and also Bluetooth.
And this is the MIMO, so
yep, multi-user MIMO.
Exactly.
Yep.
So if you have a lot of different devices, they're not going to suddenly lock out a bunch of devices. It's going to play nicely together.
Yeah, well, that's more actually about improving performance with multi-user compatible multi-user MIMO routers as well as devices. So you're correct in terms of if you have kind of that synergy, you get even a better class of performance and experience. You've got USB 3.1 as well, Intel Gigabit NIC as well, of course with a Game First Packet Party software, USB Type A, Type C, right? And then your multi-channel line level audio output. You can see though we dropped a little bit here. Of course you don't have that nice integrated lighting or the gold plating, right, which reduces oxidation, but still very, very, very nice quality board in terms of what you get. No 10G adding card, no fan extension card, right? None of the VGA
But it
brace.
supports it. So if you want 10G, you can buy the adding card.
Exactly. You can still totally do that. So this, I think, is going to be a very, very popular board that somebody still wants really top of the class performing features, and you're going to be rocking and rolling.
And once again, no price point yet. It will be launching soon on Newegg, but it should be around the Asus Prime-A on the end there, which is $349.
So now we get to really always one of my absolute favorite boards, and I think a lot of Newegg users and really the community love the Dash-A. The Dash-A is from our Prime series. It's kind of the stalwart series that we've kind of come to know for, that it sets the benchmark. It might be quote-unquote entry in terms of the price band, but it is this kind of best representation of Asus's commitment to quality, innovation, performance, and even design. It's a beautiful looking board, and it also gives contrast. This is kind of board that we target a little bit more to, I'd say, users that are looking for a different kind of aesthetic. Maybe they're still a gamer, but they want white.
Yeah,
they
I
want
love
kind of
the new
silver.
design on this.
Or they also might be more targeted, like I said, towards that professional segmentation. They want kind of maybe some of those darker tones that are more common for gamers. Now, you're going to see that one of the really cool things that we did for this generation, normally this board has actually more of a traditional white aesthetic. Here we actually went even a little bit more modern, and we went actually with silver being the primary color tone. It's a little bit hard to pick up just because from some of the angles, but I think it looks really beautiful. It's got a really clean sheen, silver finish to it, with light kind of white accents to it that just give it this really kind of fresh, modern perspective. And I think it's kind of like this beautiful synergy between Ryzen Threadripper, this chipset, and this motherboard. It's a great combination. And you can see right here, we threw it together with some, to give you an example of how there's a lot of these white components that are out there. This the Team Group T-Force Delta R, but in white. So these are also RGB DIMMs, and what you find actually one really cool thing for people that do white builds that are RGB based is the white actually allows for a lot of reflection. So you get a lot of really interesting look where actually with black it absorbs. So it gets more kind of centralized targeted lighting, but when you tend to do a lot of fill lighting with white systems, it really kind of gives it a nice pop and really kind of interesting look here. So two-stage heatsink design, like we talked about, right? You got, of course, really great performance, really great cooling, high-performance VRM in terms of capacitors, inductors, digital power delivery and control for both the CPU and for the DRAM. Got the heat pipe, the active assist fan. Of course, you got your U.2, SATA, front USB 3.0, USB 3.1. Same type of vertical design that we talked about for M.2, like the Strix board. You still have the secondary, of course, M.2 with the heatsink. You got the ProCool power with the auxiliary power connection as well. Same class of fan, expert fan controls across the board. And here the audio design, a little bit different. This features our Crystal Sound 3.0 audio design. So still isolated audio path, shielded codec, audio grade capacitors, the operational amplifier. But here we partner with DTS. So the audio suite's a little bit different. It's DTS Connect, which is great for digital output to like digital speakers or receivers. And then the latest generation DTS Headphone X, which actually is a very impressive spatialization software for taking stereo to multi-channel. So it's very interesting. So still a great option, of course, for gamers, but is also, I think, equally complementary, like I said, to the more kind of standard music, movies, or editors.
Yeah, this is going to be the video editing machine. People are going to love this. Does it also feature the impedance detecting?
Yes, there is still actually impedance detection support. So here you've got your USB BIOS flashback still. So this is also great because sometimes the A series have had this removed in terms of that flashing technology support. You got your USB 3.1, still Intel Gigabit LAN, and also features a different version of our packet priority software. It's called Turbo LAN, but same concept. It can work with that to be able to manage and prioritize your network traffic. So take, for instance, if you're uploading to a local network or you're downloading, you can help to prioritize all those things you want. USB, of course, Type A, Type C, and then your multi-channel audio and your optical output. So this board also still is going to give you support for things like the fan extension card if you want to be able to run that. You still got some nice touches like, debug LED, safe slot design on 3 of the slots as well. And what we haven't touched on from an overclocking perspective is that all 3 of these do feature our 5-way optimization auto-tuning technology. So auto-tuning, we've demoed it a lot. You guys can check it out in some other previous videos, even in our X370-based content that we showed you. But what I really want to stress to you guys is that it is software executed, but it's not quote-unquote software overclocking. It works directly on a hardware level. And really the main benefit that you're going to get here is that you can target in things like target frequency. So if you want to set 4 gigahertz, we don't know if your CPU can get there, but we will automatically attempt to get it there, test the stability for it. If it gets there, we'll set it there for you automatically. We can set target voltage. If you want to say, I want to go up to 1.375, set that, whatever your CPU can get up to, we'll do that. If you want to hit target temperature, you can also set a target temperature. So frequency, voltage, and temperature are your options. So if you want to have it be like, I don't ever want the frequency to breach 80 degrees, set 80 degrees. These are things that even for an advanced overclocker would be kind of difficult to dial in conceptually. So the fact that you can just click a button, then you can set your stress test duration, whether you want it to be 15 seconds, 15 minutes, even an hour per each interval, as well as a lot of other options. It's really impressive to allow you to have CPU and system-specific auto overclocking that you can feel really confident in.
And I think in my mind, the most important thing about this auto-tuning software is if you just listen to this and you don't know what any of that means or don't want to learn about what any of that means, you hit one button and the system is going to figure it out. It's going to take you to the most performance that you can get. So when you hear about overclocking in the past, it's this scary thing. You got to look up formulas online. The ASUS solution, it is very simple and it works. Yep. You hit the button. It does not only the CPU, but also the fans. It just does everything and goes, oh, here's where you're at. This is the most performance you're going to get and it's going to be safe. You're not going to nuke the CPU. You don't have to worry. So for video editors, people who are out there and reading about Threadripper because it's got a lot of attention, they're not necessarily PC builders. They've never done this before. But a combination of honestly any of these boards, but probably for the more professional side, the Prime, with the Threadripper CPU, and as well as the auto-tune software is going to be just like an incredible system, an incredible package.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, it leverages definitely all the work AMD's done to give you what's called an unlocked multiplier so that you can increase the performance. We didn't also speak to it, but the boards do feature what are called our Pro Clock external clock generators. This gives you more granularity and control at how you can make adjustments to the bus clock to be able to have even more granular levels of overclocking capability, and the boards support that as well. But it's really just the easiest and simplest route. And again, to stress the point that it's software executed, but actually dialed in on a hardware route, just like if you were manually doing this. Even if you remove the software, the overclock still stays there. Unless you were to reset your UEFI, your BIOS back to defaults, your overclock is there. So it's something that I really stress that you guys kind of try out and take a look at. So I think the kind of now that we've kind of given this overview on the boards, let's actually give a run through on what our system kind of configuration like. I think give you guys some context and contrast of if you're looking to be able to build X399, as well as something maybe, hey, there might be viewers out there that you guys are checking out something on X370 or B350, right? You don't necessarily are looking to spend $800 on a CPU. What does the other end of the spectrum look like? Because that's the great thing of what AMD's done with Ryzen is that across the board, whether you're talking about the entry to the upper echelon to the maximum performance you can get with the 1950X, you've got a lot of really great choices. So we're going to give you guys 2 different perspectives at 2 great builds that you could kind of go about. That are going to give you great performance, great functionality, I think great aesthetics, and ultimately a great experience when you talk about building a PC, right now in 2017.
Awesome. So for everyone that's joining us online, once again, I'm Josh from Newegg, JJ from ASUS, one of the world's top experts in PCs and technology, talking about AMD Threadripper. If you have questions, let us know on our Facebook, YouTube channels. Remember to subscribe. But walk us through. What's this thing?
Yeah, so here we got Silverstone's latest generation chassis. If you can double check the actual model number, I think this is the PMC. It's a brand new chassis from them. It's got a really interesting design in terms that, one, it's got integrated actually lighting down here at the bottom, which gives it a little bit of kind of fill that you can see kind of pops up there when the lights actually flash a little bit. It does feature a full tempered glass panel. We don't have it on here because we won't actually let you guys check that out, but it follows that that convention of people wanting to be able to check out their system. On the front, it's got beautiful intake, right? Because this is just a full open mesh front intake design. So they've got 3 high performance fans that already come included. And these also are the FG, I believe, 141 AuraSync compatible fan grills. So this is a really cool design approach because the fans themselves are not RGB, right? They're actually just transparent, good quality fans. But you can add these and then fully synchronize these and control those in terms of the motherboard. So you're fully kind of set in that regard. Now, of course, at the heart of the system itself, we already talked about, we've got the Zenith Extreme. You've got an actual shroud in here, and actually built in, powering this whole system is a Strider 800-watt titanium class fully modular PSU. Definitely, I would recommend that when you talk about something in this Ryzen class. Depending, I think, on your overclocking or your GPU, I would never go anything less than a high quality, so a gold or higher 650 watt, and I would probably make the general recommendation of probably trying to target an 800 watt as your baseline. I feel even with overclocking, that's a solid choice, but definitely I think your overall range is probably gonna be in that 800 to probably 1,000 watt range for, I think, a good quality power supply solution. So in terms of the graphics card, we've got GeForce GTX Strix GTX 1080, 11 gigabits model. So this is the kind of the upgraded model from the traditional base.
1080 Ti, right?
No. So there's 2 kind of 1080s. So it's not the 1080 Ti.
Oh, okay.
It's like right below that. So you then have that. The Team Group memory is going to be their Delta R RGB T-Force memory. DDR4 fully supports ASUS AuraSync. It's got beautiful heat spreaders. I really love the diffusion look to this also as well. You can get it in a couple of different speeds. For this one, I believe this is running 3000, so it's a little bit higher, right? But you can even get it in 3200 megahertz. So it's a great kind of balance of not going to the absolute highest end, but giving us more flexibility to be able to have more performance in terms of the bandwidth. Especially when we talked about, remember that with Threadripper, you have those kind of memory tuning options, right? Where you have the local mode and the distributed mode, which allow you to optimize the memory and how the CPU is working with the memory depending on your workload. So content creation versus maybe gaming, where you're going to maybe set different types of options available to you. And of course, we've got one optional fan grill that we outed for the included 140 millimeter fan. Cooling this all is Thermaltake's brand new Flow 360 closed loop water cooling solution. So this is a 360 millimeter based fan, so 3 fans right here at the top. They feature full RGB. You don't see it as much kind of because our lights here, but you do get a little bit of bleed down from that lighting at the top if you were to see that right there. But a very good quality cooling solution, and of course, it fully supports the bracket type solution that comes included with the Ryzen Threadripper processor. For the SSDs, we're using the DIMM.2, so we got 2 Samsung 960 NVMe Pros. And then if we flip it to the back, I didn't finish up our routing right here, but we've got 2 850 EVOs there for rounding out our storage. So it gives you kind of pretty good representation of, I think, what you would probably be taking a look at when you talk about a high performance X399 type system.
It's pretty awesome. How do you have the, just for personal curiosity, the fan set up? So you've got intake here, outtake here. Are you running intake or outtake on the top?
Yeah, so it's a good question. So yes, intake, exhaust, and then for the top here, if we didn't have such a good VRM solution, and even I would argue that maybe in some builds, I would still set it up to actually have it be an intake, I would go that route. Right now, I do have them set up as an exhaust, but really the choice is up to you. We recommend actually either or. Generally for high-end platforms like this with high memory densities and very high performance VRMs, if they're gonna be on a lot of load, I'd probably actually recommend you going more towards an intake than as opposed to an exhaust. And for some people that might be wondering, there is open venting right here to allow essentially for this to functionally work as either an intake or an exhaust. So while you don't see that right here, they have accounted for that in terms of their design. Awesome. So that gives us some perspective here on our X399 build. So let's go ahead and take a look here at our B350 build.
Why don't you just slide that guy down this way?
Okay, let's go ahead and...
And so while you're doing that, we got some questions online. Kevin from YouTube wondering about TUF, Sabertooth, some of the other boards that are popular with ASUS, the Deluxe. Do you think we'll see anything like that in the future?
As of right now, these are the primary 3 SKUs that we're focusing on in terms of the release. So these are essentially what's going to be available. There we go. Let's see right here. You guys can check that out. All right. So this is on kind of the other end of the spectrum, and this one I was really excited about. We can kind of give it this cool look right here up the front. So this is a brand new chassis from Thermaltake. This is the View, I believe 21. This is, I think, $80, which is pretty awesome, I think, for the aesthetic of the system. One, it's fully visible right here in the front that you can see, so it really lends itself, of course, to some type of LED type of fan. RGB, of course, implementation. Still has actually a tempered side glass panel. Again, we removed it for purposes so that you guys could kind of take a look inside. It's got a top fan mount support right here, 120 or 140 millimeter, and then a rear fan support here in terms of 120 millimeter. So if we give you guys some perspective, you can see we've got some really, really cool fans here. These are actually from Aska. These are their Venom RGB series. So these are pretty much brand new to the market, but they are fully ASUS Aura Sync supported. So they're also another great way that if you want to be able to fully synchronize it with the entirety of your system, these can connect. And another really cool accessory that we have here from Aska that we're not utilizing, you might not be able to see easily, is actually they have an Aura RGB header splitter. So you can essentially run that to the header and get 4 outputs. So that's great for something like the fans, because all the fans in terms of their Aura sync control can go to that header.
Yeah, and so it's a little bit different than the solutions from Thermaltake, Corsair, where they have their own control box. What's happening here for people that are just getting into RGBs, it's running off the 12-volt 4-pin header that's on the motherboard.
Correct.
Rather than, say, running off of USB or connecting to an external little box like, say, NZXT's Hue. Mm-hmm. This is a very cool solution, and personally, it's pretty awesome. It makes it clean, it makes it a little bit cheaper, and lets it all be controlled all through the motherboard.
Yeah, I mean, and there's definitely still value to having isolated systems. Like the Thermaltake Flow that we have right here has its own box to control its included fans.
Yeah, which is floating around back here.
Yeah, and that is a great option. It allows you to do some hardware controls. It has integrated expansion. Also, it's nice, of course, if you use this on maybe other platforms, right, that don't have native RGB support built in. Mm-hmm. But the benefit of course, this type of implementation is that we can just synchronize every single component that's connected, right? So next in there is a Strix B350F series motherboard. So it's a really nice board. It's got a good quality VRM. It's got, good NIC. It's got all your standard I/O that you would want in terms of, USB 3.0, front connection, base connectivity, improved audio design, all that good stuff. And we'll try to see if we can get a little tight in here. But we've got, for our storage, we've got an M.2 right in here. So that's Western Digital's latest generation M.2 based SSD. So this is a great kind of value proposition for this type of system right here, because this is a larger capacity. So one of the cool things that they did with this type of drive is to allow for larger densities. Traditionally, M.2, you're usually limited to like, 240, 512, but you didn't have maybe like 1 terabyte or larger base capacities. So at the price point that they're offering a solution like this, it really complements this type of build, because I can buy a larger capacity but lower price but still high performance SSD. So I don't have to necessarily maybe run like a split base configuration. I can get the value of putting one single drive in there, get great performance for fast boot times, quick game application patches being loaded, right? And not have to have multiple, type of drive configurations. My operating system, my games, everything's going to run on one large capacity drive.
Yeah, and that's this is the new Western Digital, the WD Blue 3D NAND SSD. It's sizes up to 2 terabytes. They sent us a sample to play around with. So this is the SATA speed, so it's running on the SATA M.2 rather than, say, the WD Black, which is the NVMe version, which is faster.
And that might be a combination that if you wanted to go that route for a build like this, you would maybe go with a little bit lower capacity, so you get like the 512, and then maybe you pair it with like a 1 terabyte mechanical hard drive. Here, we went with a larger 1 terabyte drive, because that's very common as kind of like a mid-range entry point for people to have 1 terabyte to cover kind of all their general usage. But the simplicity of the M.2 and still that great performance, it's a really great choice for this build. Of course, we paired this up with then an RX 580, great mid-range GPU, can comfortably handle, FreeSync-based displays, 1080p, even some basic 2560 by 1440 gaming is possible on this type of GPU configuration.
Is that Vega?
Not
No, it's
Vega.
not.
Vega's
So there's been a lot
coming.
of questions about it.
Vega's coming.
Hold on, everyone. Soon.
Rounding out so we have the Ask a Fans. We've got 3 right here. Maybe I'll tilt it a little bit so you guys can see it from the inside right there. It looks really awesome here from the front, but a little bit hard for you guys to see. But you can see we got 3 front intakes. We have then one here on the top of our system, then one here on the rear of the system. And like I said, these are all synchronized with our motherboard using the integrated Aura RGB headers. And then we have Thermaltake's nice. This is their 12 series tower heatsink cooler, but we went ahead and also replaced the actual primary fan. The fan that comes included works great, no problems there, but to add kind of that little bit more pop and have that synchronization, we added in one more to be able to kind of tie it all together.
And again, this is Ryzen 3, AMD Ryzen 3. It's their lower end processor. This is not Threadripper in here, so
Right.
I'm not seeing air cooling on Threadripper.
Yeah, well, there will be actually with the Noctua solutions.
We're not doing that right now.
Yeah, but for this system right here, yeah, this is a Ryzen 3 1300X. And I love this part because for a lot of people that are first getting into gaming, quad core is still very, very solid to be able to handle just about anything. Plus you have overclocking support on the CPU, so you can actually get some additional performance out of it. It's very light on the wallet. I think if you check out the price point of a Ryzen 3 1300X, you pair this with a board, you're coming in pretty conservative in terms of the overall price point. Even this cooling solution.
It's $129, yeah.
Yeah, this TT cooling solution I think is only officially about like 30 bucks. But it's still a nice direct contact heat pipe based design. It's going to help to keep it cool and quiet. Now powering the system, we've got a 650 watt modular Thermaltake Smart RGB Series PSU. We also got hooked up here with the TT Mod Series. So these are some nice little aftermarket. It comes with actually nice black cables, very similar actually to the cables we have in our Zenith system. Of course, an easy way to always pump up a system, make it look a little bit nicer, is just adding in some nice high quality aftermarket cables. So you can do that with the TT mods. And they have these beautiful included cable combs. A lot of times you don't get cable combs included with custom cables. Alternating red and black. Now ideally for this system, probably when I'd be all finished, I'd probably set this on a red synced Aura display, and I think that would just look awesome. So I like the contrast of having just a little bit of black in there with the red, and we've got that thrown in there. So all the way around, this I think gives you a really nice example of a fairly price aggressive build. I mean, when you talk about chassis, you know, like I said, 80 bucks, 30 something odd dollars for the heatsink. The Strix B350F motherboard is also an aggressively priced board. I think just a little over about $100 in that price range. RX 580, of course, is now finally starting to stabilize a bit now because we're seeing a little bit of die down
miners.
Due to the mining demand. But when you can get it at its normal price, it's a great part in terms of its performance, right?
And then, these things with the Strix cards are nearly silent.
Yeah,
it's pretty.
Yeah, I mean, and these cards are going to give you great designs. They have integrated, of course, lighting. They've got fan connectors on many of our cards. Even
is that a 2.5
dedicated
space card?
No, all the standard Strix, with the exception of 1080 Ti, are 2-slot.
Okay.
Only our 1080 Ti is a 2.5 slot based design. So this gives you, I think, another great kind of foundation that shows you that I think with AMD and what they've done overall with the kind of the release of their chipset and their CPUs, when you take a look at Ryzen, right, you now have a lot of choices. You've got B350, right? You've got your A320, you've got X370. For X370, I don't think we had the chance to actually get it out here. Right? I think we had the box over there in the corner, but we had our brand new Strix X370 board that just came out a little bit ago. We've got the new Crosshair
And those are the ones
Extreme
for
that's coming out.
Typically want to partner them with Ryzen 7.
Correct, yeah. Ryzen 5, Ryzen 7 is going to be that spot, you know, for those boards.
These numbers are a little confusing for people that are looking at motherboards because there's X299, X399,
Yeah.
Z270, ZX. I mean, it gets just insanely confusing. So why don't you run through again, if you could, just kind of the layout of the motherboards?
Yeah, so again, kind of starting at that entry-level position, right? If you're looking for a great gaming build, you're probably trying to target that, let's say, $500 to $800 price band, maybe even a little bit less than that, like $400 to $700. Really great choices, B350 series of boards, right? Those are going to still give you overclocking support, and they can actually support any Ryzen series CPU in terms of the standard range, 3, 5, or 7.
These are all AM4 socket.
Yeah, but they probably pair best with like a Ryzen 3 or Ryzen 5 series CPU. If we step up to the next range, you're going to go into the X370 series chipset. So this is kind of really the performance-oriented chipset from AMD. It really targets in best suited towards Ryzen 5, Ryzen 7.
And this is the most popular. This is the one that launched. Yep. This is the exciting one.
Yep, and that's going to talk about also core count. When we go down to the entry level, right, you're talking about like quad core based design. When you go into then Ryzen 5, Ryzen 7, you're looking into 12 core, and then you're moving into the highest 8 core, 16 thread based parts. And then now with the latest chipset, something like here, X399, the 3 motherboards that we've talked about, you're moving to the highest end chipset, and of course with the 2 CPUs, the 1920 and the 1950X, there's, of course, you're stepping up to 12-core, 24-thread, and 16-core, 32-thread. So AMD is really giving you this expansive kind of portfolio to be able to look at that wherever you're at, from, I think, productivity, from gaming, from multitasking usage, right? There's a chipset, there's a CPU, and there's a solution to be able to give you a great experience, right? And, you know, coming down here at Newegg Studios, giving you guys this breakdown, it's about giving you guys the opportunity to see the wide range of items that we do to be able to enable these experiences for you guys, and where you can come in and you can purchase all these to be able to build yourself a really great system. And definitely, you know, we'll have more content in the future coming out to give you guys insight at different options, different types of configurations you can go with. But really, really cool time, and I think it's really awesome part that now is available with this Ryzen Threadripper and these X390 series of motherboards.
Yeah, no, for sure. This is a very exciting time for CPUs, for technology, and what this does, because the industry is changing, and seeing massive multi-core systems like this is pretty interesting. So for everyone watching, all the links are below the YouTube stream, our Facebook stream, or on GameCrate.com. Check them out. All the products are available on Newegg.com. Some of them, like the Zenith board, are out of stock because they're just so popular. They've been sold out. More will be coming in stock very shortly. The Strix is launching soon. The Prime-A
just got skewed in, so yeah, you should be.
So it is available. You can pre-order it. It's not going to be shipping until the end of this month. But these are popular, man. I can't believe the numbers. Like, these are actually really moving, and so because the performance is there at price points that are kind of shocking. Yep. So it's been really exciting. But thank you everyone for watching. And once again, I'm Josh from Newegg.
And I'm JJ here from ASUS. If you guys also are looking just for a little bit, kind of once again reclarification, you guys can check out our EdgeUp website. That's edgeup.asus.com. We have a full buyer's guide on the latest series of boards, not only for X399, but also for the X370 series of chipset. Also, if you guys have any questions, I'll try to go back into the comments and answer them, or you can also find me on social media. You can hit me up on Twitter, ASUS Tech Marketing JJ. But with that, thank you guys. It's been awesome to be able to talk about what AMD and ASUS have done to be able to give birth to, I think, an awesome platform for you guys out there as enthusiasts.
Thanks so much for coming. See you guys next time.